Okay, so today's little investigation is the story of Aeneas and the borrowed hoodie. A story of love, guilt, anger, and betrayal. So let's just remind ourselves where the story of Aeneas begins. And you'll remember, I'm sure, that as he tells his story to Dido and the Carthaginians, he's drawing back the details about the Trojan War. In the confusion of battle, Aeneas is gripped by furor, and we have this sense of him kind of suddenly wanting to die as a heroic warrior. Frenzy and anger drove me on. Suddenly it seemed like a noble thing to die in arms, as he says in Book 2. The frenzy carries him along to the palace. He's been fighting various people and finds himself alone where Helen is hiding in the Temple of Vesta. Remember, the Temple of Vesta is significant because it's where the hearth comes from, and the Vesta is worshipped by the Vestal Virgins in Rome. Though there is no fame worth remembering to be won by punishing a woman, says Aeneas, I shall take pleasure in feeding the flames of vengeance. So actually, he's got to a point where he's so willing to ignore his duty as a man and as a soldier that he's going to kill Helen. What brings about that change of direction? Well, the key thing is Venus comes and says, what do you think you're doing? Sort yourself out, go home to your family, and there you can recraft your destiny and have your pietas properly directed. And this is what enables him to follow the instructions he got from Hector. Do you remember Hector came to him in a dream and said to him, look for a great city to establish after long wanderings across the sea. When he gets home, there's going to be this sign of the flame by Ulysses' head, clap of thunder from Jupiter. When they leave, Creusa mysteriously is killed in the departure, and she comes to him as well and says, go and marry a bride in a foreign land. So Book 2 is all about the inner struggle of Aeneas' mortal vision and the immortal plan. And the immortal plan wins out, doesn't it? It sends him on his way with the Trojans to go and fulfill the immortal plan rather than his desire, which is to die in battle. So far, so good. Things seem to be excellent. And Venus says to him, look, I shall tear away from you all around you the dank clouds that veils your eyes and dulls your mortal vision. So there's the shift of direction occurring. If that's the case, how does the pietas get knocked off course? And this is where the hoodie appears. We find him in Book 4 wearing Dido's cloak that she's made for him, glowing with Tyrian purple. There hung from his shoulders a rich cloak given him by Dido, into which she had woven a fine cross thread of gold. And the text even says the work had been a delight to her. So that is where he is off course. And then, having indulged in his amour, having indulged in his passion, he's busted by Mercury, isn't he? And Mercury's the one who brings him back on course. So Mercury turns up and says, are you laying foundations for the high towers of Carthage and building a splendid city to please your? Yes, wife. And we know that Aeneas is not meant to be married to Dido. In fact, he's meant to have found a new bride in Italy. So that little doggy face might be just exactly what Aeneas is feeling. The challenge, have you entirely forgotten your own kingdom and your own destiny? Here, again, the immortals have to step in where Aeneas' mortal vision has derailed him and brought him back online through immortal intervention. Aeneas' reaction then, his hair stood on end, the voice stuck in his throat, and he suddenly remembers that he's actually meant to be doing something else. And his plan is basically run to the hills. He's not going to hang around and try and explain himself. He ordered them to muster the men on the shore and keep secret the reason for the change of plan. He's worried that the Carthaginians might try and stop the Trojans from leaving. Meantime, he himself would try to make approaches to her. Well, we'll remember that Dido knows exactly what's going on and confronts him before cursing him that she'll follow him not in life but in the black fires of death. So again, Aeneas overcomes amour not because of his sense of pietas, but because of immortal intervention. Things change slightly in the second half of the text, don't they? Why does Aeneas lose it in Book 10? And I tell you what, that's a fierce-looking tattoo on that picture. In Book 8, Evander, as he says goodbye to Pallas, says, "Oh, my dear son, my only source of joy given to me so late in life, I want no grim news to come and wound my ears. Aeneas is responsible for Pallas." Oh, dearie me, because as we know, Pallas is killed. And when the news comes to Aeneas, he says, before his eyes he could see Pallas, Evander, everything. That flashback moment of, oh, I made a big promise, and then I got distracted, and now what's happened? Everything, the table he'd sat down to, the right hand of friendship. And the result is the furor overcomes Aeneas once again. He is involved in human sacrifice, he kills Mezentius and Lausus, and in the battle, everything that stood before him he harvested with the sword. This time it's not amour, it's furor that overcomes him. But after the guilt and furor, what's left? Where does Aeneas end up? Well, the expression of his regret, I think, is really interesting. In Book 11, line 73, then Aeneas brought out 2 robes stiffened with gold and purple threads which Sidonian Dido had long since made for him with her own hands, picking out the warp in fine gold, and the work had been a joy to her. That's right. He's still got her hoodie. When he dumped her, he went away with that hoodie. Does that suggest that in some way Dido still has a place in Aeneas's heart? But the interesting thing about it is, in the end, the emotion of the death of Pallas is more powerful. To try and assuage his guilt, try and cover up and deal with his guilt, he uses the love he's still got for Dido. I would suggest that even in the second half of the text, he still is carrying some sense of love for Dido in his heart. And then at the moment of great and emotional intensity, at the death of Pallas, he turns to that symbolic gesture of taking Dido's cloak and using it in the funeral. So the borrowed hoodie eventually ends up on the pyre and is burnt with the body of Pallas. And I think that tells us a little bit about how Aeneas, all the way through the text, is still driven by his mortal desires, even though he has immortal responsibilities. And hopefully that's helpful in thinking about the personality of Aeneas.